Masechet Moed Katan Daf Chaf Bet. Two main topics. First, we talk about a family member who arrives to sit, but he arrives not on the first day. Later on, can you join the rest of the family to sit and count the seven with them? Most of the daf is going to be talking about the differences between someone mourning over his parents versus over other relatives, stringencies regarding one's parents versus other relatives. So we begin tenora banan avel shelosha yamim harishonim ba mimakom karov moneh imahen. If someone who is in mourning but he's not there with the rest of the family at the time of the burial when they start. So if he comes from a place that's close by, Yomi define close by as within a day's journey. I guess nowadays everywhere in the world is a day's journey, but back then the point is he is close by. For whatever reason, he just couldn't make it on that day. As long as he makes it within the first 3 days, he can count with them. So he arrives on the second day, he can still finish on the 7th day, that along with everyone else. So he would only be sitting for 6 days or 5 days if he arrives on the 3rd day. So the idea is that they have to be there for some of the first 3 days, because that's the most intense part of the mourning period. If he arrives 4th day, 5th day, he missed out on that experience of the first 3 days. And so therefore, if he comes from a faraway place, he has to count on his own, no matter what, no matter when he showed up. He was too far away when they started, and so he can't join up with them. After the 4th day, then he even if he was close by but was detained for whatever reason, he has to count on his own. So therefore, the point is that in order to count with the family, with the rest of the family, and skip the first 2 days, first day 2 or 3, he has to have both conditions, both be within close proximity, and he has to actually arrive within the first 3 days. That is Tanakama. Rabbi Shimon Omer, afilu bayom hashiviri makom karov moneh imahen. Rabbi Shimon is lenient, and he says even if he comes on the 7th day, and he's close, as long as he's close by, he can count along with them. That proximity is enough to join him, even though he didn't actually start sitting together with them until the very last day. Amar Moed. Okay, according to what we just said, Shelosha yamim harishonim ba mimakom karov moneh imahen. Amar Rabbi Chia bar Abba, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, hu sheyesh gadol habayit babayit. Says this law of the Tanakama says that when the first 3 days, if you're close by, you can count with them. That's only if the head of the household is also there. So then the other family member can go and follow the head of the household, whoever it is, the oldest sibling, whoever everyone looks up to in the family, so that would be fine. But the other way around, if it's the head of the household was away and then shows up the next day, then the head of the household cannot follow the younger members. Only the other way around. Question: Ibaya lehu halach gadol habayit lebet hakebarot mahu. Okay, sometimes like we do today, sometimes when someone wants to bury their loved one in Israel. And so some people will go on the plane with the body to Israel, and other people will remain at home. So those who remain at home, they start sitting right away. As soon as they send off the body, then they turn around and go back home, and they start sitting right away. Whereas the ones that go to the burial, they will start sitting after the burial. So nowadays they'll, probably it's usually within the same day. But in those days, so you might someone died in one city, and so some people will remain in that city and sit shiva'ah. Other people will accompany the body, and if it's going to be buried, let's say outside the city or in another city, that might be 2, 3, 4 days a walk away. So in that case, the people that remain behind in the city, as soon as they turn around and go back home at the edge of the city, the company's edge of the city, they start mourning right away. Whereas the people going with the body will only start mourning a couple of days later. So that's the standard model. Here the question is, what if the head of the household went to the cemetery? And so how would we apply the law in that case? Do we have to follow the head of the household like we just saw, right? If someone comes late, there has to be, you can only join in with the rest of the family if the head of the household is there. Maybe everyone has to wait for the head of the household, or because they actually were all together at the beginning, and the head of the household only left in order to bury. Maybe when the head of the household comes back, that he can actually join the rest of the family, even though they're younger than him. But he knows he was there, and they're all kind of starting off without him, having him in mind that when he comes back, he would join. That's the question. And the answer is yes, he can. If the leader of the family was just away and he couldn't make it back, and he comes back, he has to start his own count, even on the second, third day. But if they're all together and he's actually going to bury the dead and then coming back, then he can join in the rest of the family. Even if it took him a couple of days, he can come back and count with them. Question, Monei Mahen, Batanya Monei Le'atzmo. Hold on, this is a braita that's proved one way. We actually have another braita that says when he comes back, the head of the household from burying the dead, he has to start his own count. That's a contradictory braita. So is it just a contradiction, or can we reconcile them? Oh, so if he comes back within 3 days, so the other city where the cemetery is was only a day or two away, he came back within 3 days, then he can join the family. But if he comes back after the third day, and so as we said, the first 3 days is the most intense mourning, and he has to be there for part of that in order to join. If it's after 3 days, that's what the second Baraita was talking about. He has to start his own count from 1. כי הדאמר להו רב לבני הסלפוני, דעתו בגו תלתה, למנו בהדייכו, דלעתו בגו תלתה, למנו נפשייהו. When this is proven further from this story, Rav said to these people when they were in mourning, says if other family members come, they're not here now, but they come within 3 days, they can join your count. But if they come after 3 days, then they have to count themselves. Amar lehu Ravad ibnei Mechoza, atun dela azlitu batar arsa, mechi mehaderitu apaychu mebaba leabula atchilu menu. So Ravad told the people of Mechoza. Ravad was the great rabbi, was the rabbi of the city of Mechoza. He says, you people who you are not going with the coffin to the cemetery. You're staying in the city. So your law is, as soon as you turn your face away from the gates of the city, you're going to accompany the body to the gate. When you turn around and go back home, and the body will then continue with other people, you start counting immediately, even before the burial, even before the body is buried. Because they have left the body now, they're not dealing with anymore, they start their burial right away. And that is also what we do today when someone is sent to Israel. Rabbi Shimon Omer, afilu ba bayom hashebi'im imakom karov monei mahen. So we saw in that first braita that Rabbi Shimon is lenient, and he says even if a family member couldn't come for whatever reason, but he is nearby, even if he comes on the 7th day, as the 7th day they're about to get up, nevertheless he can count with them, which means that person that comes late, he might just sit shiva just 1 day. Amar Rabbi Chia bar Gamda, Amar Rabbi Yosef ben Shaul, Amar Rabbi, who shebal masa menachamin eslo. As this only applies when that person, a family member, comes late, he finds that there are still consolers in the house, because since the 7th day, we follow the opinion that says miksat hayom kekulo, that they don't have to sit the whole day. So by the afternoon, that's it. They're already out. They're going to shower. Maybe they'll visit the cemetery. So if he comes late, then forget about it. Only if he comes in the morning and there are still other consolers there, they're still sitting, then he can come sit with them and sit for a half hour, however long, and then get up with them. That is okay. Okay, what about right in between? Let's say, they 7th day, they prayed and they ate breakfast, and a few people came to join, and by 9:30 they're getting ready to leave. They didn't get up yet officially, but they're looking around. Where's my shoes? Well, we're about to go. So what if he comes just in time? That's a question. It's unresolved if they're already stirring to leave, but didn't actually totally get up yet, would be the question. Okay. Gemiri chavre de Rabbi Abba bar Chiyam Rabbi Abba umano Rabbi Zera. Bamri la chavre de Rabbi Zera Rabbi Zera umano Rabbi Abba bere de Rabbi Chiyam bar Abba Amar Rabbi Yochanan. Okay. Someone said in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, we're not sure if it was the friend of Rabbi Abba, and that would be the Rabbi Zera. So Rabbi Zera said this, or some say it's the friend of Rabbi Zera. And that's Rabbi Abba. So either Rabbi Abba told Rabbi Zera or Rabbi Zera told Rabbi Abba. One of them told the other, but they're both students of Rabbi Yochanan, who said, Halacha k'Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel b'trefot, v'halacha k'Rabbi Shimon be'abel. K'Rabbi Shimon be'abel had amaran. Rabbi Yochanan, the second thing he said was that we followed Rabbi Shimon regarding avelut. All right, what we just said, if someone is for whatever reason detained and shows up at the house of the Bet Avel on the seventh day, and he's a member of the family who has to mourn, yeah, that's it. He can count with them, even if it's just one day. This is a useful halacha sometimes. For example, if someone is sitting for, let's say, an estranged father or something, right, who they never saw, so they don't really want to sit shiva, but halachically, you still have to do the technicality. So sometimes just one member of the family will sit the shiva. They won't tell the other members, and then they'll tell them on the last day, okay, just come and sit. So then that way they could sit for a few minutes. Because it's if it's in a difficult situation like that. Okay, so Rabbi Shimon, we follow the halacha because we're always mekel. And how about K'Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel b'trefot? What is he referring to when he said regarding determining whether an animal that is very sick and will not be able to live on its own is a terefa, and even if you do shechita on it, and you find that it has some kind of wound, blemish inside, it is not kosher. Okay, the laws of terefot are very difficult and subtle. You have to know a lot about anatomy and what would cause an animal to die and what things it could live with. So he was lenient regarding, he said a certain halacha regarding terefot. What is it? Ditnan, here's the Mishnah that explains it. Generally, if you open up an animal and you find its intestines have a hole in it, then that's a terefa. It wasn't going to live long, so it's not kosher. However, if you find that there is a hole, but it's stopped up with mucus, there is a mucus membrane around the intestines, and so perhaps that is sufficient for it to be healthy enough. So Rabban Shimon Gamliel says it's okay, it's kasher. Okay, what is this? Mailecha, what is this mucus you're talking about? Amarav Kahana, shirka de me'ayad nefeka gabdu chaka. It's a certain fat, some substance that if you would squeeze it, it would come out. But if you leave it in place, it may be sufficient protection. Amar mandehu iske v'asik v'agmera d'shmate mipumeh demare. So someone said, I wish I could go hear this from the author himself, from Rabbi Yochanan. In other words, Rabbi Yochanan said this to one of these students. We weren't sure which student he said it to and who said it to what. So we only heard it indirectly from one of the students. But what he said, I want to go hear it myself from the original source. Okay, actually, no, someone only heard it in the name of Rabbi Zera or Rabbi Abba, and he wants to go to Israel to hear it directly from Rabbi Zera or Rabbi Abba, who heard it from Rabbi Yochanan. So he wishes he did. One day, this person, whoever it was, his dream came true. Ki selek vashkechel Rabbi Abba bered Rabbi Chia bar Abba amar le amar mor. Now we know that of the two versions before, it was in fact Rabbi Abba that said it. So he finally went to Israel and he found Rabbi Abba and says, please tell me, did you say that, yes, we can follow this leniency of Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel, even if it has a hole in it, but there's mucus on top, then it's a kosher animal? Amar le ana en halacha amri. Says, no, I didn't say it is kosher. I said it is not kosher. We do not follow the opinion of Rabban Shimon. Okay, it's only one word difference, but it's a key word, right? It means the exact opposite. I guess that's why he wanted to go himself. And it was something strange. He couldn't believe that we actually would follow the opinion of Rabban Shimon Gamliel, who's so lenient regarding this, and so he wanted to go check himself. And it's a good thing he checked, because he found out that the way the tradition was passed on when it got to Bavel was incorrect. Now, what about the halacha regarding Avel? You said that we follow the lenient opinion of Rabbi Shimon regarding Avel, that even if he comes in the seventh day, latecomer comes on the seventh day, you can count with the family. Is that true? Did you say that? Amar le piluk tanin. Who actually that I did not say clearly one way or the other because it's a machloket. Titmar Rav Chista Amar halacha. Bechen Amar Rabbi Yochanan halacha. Rav Nachman Amar en halacha. See, the first two sages, including Rabbi Yochanan, say yes, that is the law. So on the one hand, I mean, he was quoting Rabbi Yochanan above, so that one may be an accurate accurate tradition. However, there's another Rav Nachman that says we don't follow it. Now the bottom line is ואין הלכה כרבן שמעון בן גמליאל בטרפות והלכה כרבי שמעון באבל דאמר שמואל הלכה כדברי המקל באבל. And the bottom line is we do not follow Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel regarding the hole in the intestines because we saw that the correct tradition was we do not follow his opinion, so we were stringent. However, we do follow the lenient opinion of Rabbi Shimon because Shmuel says we always follow the lenient opinion regarding laws of mourning, and therefore some family member who came only on this, even if he came just on the seventh day, can sit with the family, the rest of the family, just for a few minutes in that morning, and get up, and that's it. He fulfilled his 7 days of mourning. Good. Now we're going to see a long list of differences between someone who is mourning his parents versus other close relatives. So for all relatives, one should be quick to bury the body. The faster you are, the better, because we don't want to leave the body out for a long time. It's not respectful. It's not nice. So it's nice to do it quickly. But on one's parents, that is not a proper thing to do. You shouldn't be rushing to a person shouldn't be rushing to bury his parents, but rather he should give long eulogy, feel the pain, says, "Oh, I can't let go of them," and so he should do it in a slowly. Okay, there actually is a custom. The Spanish Portuguese until today have a custom that then when they are carrying the body in the cemetery, they walk for a little bit and then they actually stop and put it stop and wait, and then walk a little more, stop and wait, to show we're not rushing to bury the person. We are doing it reluctantly, and then we have to. It's a mitzvah. We go on, and so that custom probably that source is probably from here. היה ערב שבת או ערב יום טוב, הרי זה משובח שאינו עושה אלא לכבוד אביו ואמו. If it was Friday or Erev Yom Tov, then it's a mitzvah to do it quickly, because if you don't make it before sunset, you're not going to be able to bury on Shabbat, and then you're going to have to leave the body over till Sunday, and that's really not a nice thing to do. And so if you're hurrying for the sake of the deceased himself, herself, then it is praiseworthy to rush. Regarding the other relatives, someone, let's say someone is doing business. Now, generally, Havel is not supposed to do business, but we did see that there is an exception for Davar Havel, significant loss. They can do some business. Anyway, for other relatives, even if he's allowed to do business, if he wants to do less, it's nice to do less. If he doesn't want to, he doesn't have to. But for one's father and mother, even if it's a case of financial loss and he has to do some business, still for that person, he should do as little as possible, because mourning over his parents is more stringent. So in those days, a person in mourning would not only tear their garments, they would also bare a shoulder. That would just show how they're how sad they are and kind of shame. And so one can do that for all other relatives. If he wants to bare his shoulder, he can. He doesn't have to. But for one's father and mother, one must remove the garments from his shoulder. Maaseh begadol hador. One time there was a great sage. We'll identify him in a minute. A great sage of the generation, and whose father died, and so therefore he was about to uncover his shoulder, which is proper to do, was for his father. But his colleague, who was also a great, one of the greatest sages of a generation, said, "Oh, and in deference to you, I want to empathize, and I'm gonna bear my shoulder also." So v'nimna v'lo chalas, and then the mourner, the son, decided, changed his mind. He says, "I'm not going to bear my shoulder because I don't want my colleague, who's also a great sage, to look disheveled like that. So better that I should not honor my father by uncovering my shoulder rather than uncover my shoulder, and then this other sage would have to do it too." And so he did not. Interesting. Amar Abaye, who are these people? Gadol Hador Rabbi. The great sage of generation was Rabbi. He's the one that lost his father. Gadol Hador Shemo Rabbi Yaakov Baracha, and his colleague was Rabbi Yaakov. Some say the opposite. Vika de Amre. Gadol Hador Rabbi Yaakov Baracha. Gadol Hador Shemo Rabbi. Some say the person that lost his father was Rabbi Yaakov, and his colleague, who was also Gadol Hador, was Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi. So we could understand if the colleague was Rabbi, so that means Rabbi Yaakov Baracha, he lost his father, he was going to bear his shoulder, but then he saw that if he did it, his friend Rabbi would also do it, and he didn't want Rabbi, who was the Nasi, to walk around with a bare shoulder on his account. So Rabbi Yaakov changed his mind. And that scenario would make sense. But if the colleague was Rabbi Yaakov Baracha and the person who lost his father was Rabbi, then why would Rabbi refrain from uncovering his shoulders? Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel, Kashya. After all, Rabbi's father was Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel, and he was the patriarch. We're going to see at the end of the daf that when a patriarch dies, the whole community treats it in such a serious way as if it was their own father that died, and therefore, since when the Rashbag died, Rabbi Yaakov would have to bear his shoulder anyway because the Nasi died, and so therefore there would be no reason for Rabbi Yehuda Nasi to refrain from covering his shoulder out of deference to Rabbi Yaakov, because Rabbi Yaakov is going to undo it anyway. And so we leave that with a question according to that version. So it sounds like the other version is the one that makes more sense. Okay. For other relatives that pass away, one can take a haircut after 30 days. For one's father and mother, you have to not only wait 30 days, but also until his friends come and say, "Oh, you look really terrible." And you go take a haircut. They get angry at him, and so only because he's like forced to from social pressure. So that's he has to wait a little bit longer till he really looks disheveled. Al kol hametim kulan nichnas lebet hasimcha lachar 30 yom. Al aviv alimo lachar 12 chodesh. Regarding other relatives that die, the mourner can go to a party, to a celebration after 30 days. But if someone loses his father or mother, then he has to wait until 12 months to go to a party. Amar Baba Bar Chana usimchat mereut. Baba Bar Chana says that the mourner is permitted to go to a close gathering, a social gathering. So while he cannot go to a big wedding feast, but if he wants to go to just some friends are getting together, then that is permitted. Okay. Metibe, hold on. A challenge to Rabbah, right? This would be within may enter house of after 30 days, right? So it sounds like according to this, it's for stringency that when it says you're allowed to go to a party, that's only close friends, but to a large wedding, you have to wait not after 30 days, you have to wait longer. Hold on, we have a braita that says ulsimcha ulmereut shiloshim yom kashya. This says for a celebration and for a small social gathering is 30 days. So you see, puts them together. That according to this, simcha must be a wedding, even a big wedding. And so whether it's big or small gathering, 30 days after 30 days is permitted. And so this is a challenge to the Baba Bar Chana that says, no, only for a small gathering is permitted, but not for a big gathering. And so we don't have any answer to that. But we do have another version of what he said. Another version of this discussion is Amar Baba Bar Chana usimchat mereut mutar likanes le'atar. Okay, in this version, it's actually for leniency. When it says up here that when for other relatives, besides father and mother, one may not go to a party, that's only talking about a big wedding. for 30 days. But if it's a small gathering of friends, let's say they get together every Thursday night, they go to someone's house on a rotation. So it's a small gathering that is permitted immediately, right after the 7 days, even within the month. That's okay. Hold on. We have a braita that says both for simcha and for a small social gathering. So it sounds like whether big or small, it's 30. So it can't be right away. And we answer la kashya ha barisuta ha bepur anuta. It depends if it was the first gathering. Let's say they go to different people's houses each time. If the mourner happens to be the first on the list, then he's not allowed. He says, okay, you know what? Delay. I'm within my 30 days, so we'll start off later. But if he put a lifroa means to pay back. If other people already hosted and now he owes, so he doesn't have to keep everybody waiting and push it off. He can reciprocate within 30 days if it's a small social gathering, but just not for a wedding. Good. For other relatives, one must tear his garment 1 tefach, right? About this long, 3 or so inches. But for a father and mother, one must tear all the way until he reaches his heart. We see from this another halacha that's not explicit in the Talmud, but that for a father and mother, one tears on the left side where the heart is. For other relatives, it's on the right side, because for a father and mother, that's closer to the heart and feels more painful. How do we know that for other relatives it's 1 tefach? David, when he heard bad news about Shaul dying, he held his clothes and tore them. So to grab his clothes means he grabbed them with a fist. So that's a fistful. The smallest amount that one can grab with a fist would be a tefach. Al-kol, so has to be at least that much. Al-kol metim kulan. For regarding other relatives, if someone's wearing 10 layers, he only has to tear the outermost layer. So for a father and mother, he has to tear all the layers except for the undergarment. The undergarment is really all just there to catch sweat. It's not really an important garment, and therefore one does not have to tear that one. All this applies to both men and women who are sitting. They have to tear their clothing accordingly. Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar אומר, האישה קורעת את התחתון ומחזירתו לאחוריה וחוזרת וקורעת את העליון. Rabbi Shimon wants to address the modesty issue. If you're tearing a woman's blouse, how can she remain modest? So he has a good solution. First one tears the inner garment, and then turn it backwards so that the tear will be on her back. And then you go ahead and tear the next layer, and so that she always has one layer that's not torn that will cover her up, and then the other layer that's torn, and that to show that she is in mourning, and that way she can be modest. Al kol metim kulan rasa mavdil kame safa shelo rasa eno mavdil v'alaviv alimo mavdil. When one is cutting the shirt. So regarding others, you can do it on the hem or not on the hem. So cutting a shirt on the hem would be much more noticeable. It's like you really see it torn into two. Whereas if it's not in the hem, it's just kind of making the neckline a little bit bigger on the seam, and so it's not as noticeable. So for others, for other relatives, either way is fine. But for one's father and mother, person should cut on the hem itself. Rabbi Yehuda Omer kol kirya she'eno mavdil kameh safa shelo eno ela kera shel tiflut. Rabbi Yehuda explains further that he says for anyone, any tearing that does not separate the garment altogether is not considered a tear. It's a nonsense tear. So it has to be noticeable. Rabbi Abu for everyone. My Tamad Rabbi Yehuda, what's his source? Tichtiv ha'chazek b'bgadav b'kra'im lishnayim kera'im. He took hold of his clothes and he tore them into 2 two pieces. If it says he tore them, do I know that he tore it into two parts? So therefore it teaches that it has to actually look like two parts, and it can't just be torn in such a way that it just looked like it's a bigger neck hole. And it has to be evident that that the garment itself is totally torn. Al kol hametim kulan sholeh la'achar shiv'a u'me'achel la'achar sheloshim. Regarding other relatives, one may repair the tear. Well, you can repair it in just with rough stitches after the shiva, and then after the shiloshim, you can take it back to the tailor and make it nice again and reuse the shirt. Nowadays, I don't think most people would do that, but in those days, they only had a couple of shirts. They were very expensive, and so they would resew it and then wear it normally. But for one's father and mother, you should remember that longer and cannot do anything until after 30 days. You can do a rough stitching, but to permanently sew it back up, never. So it'll be a reminder always on that loss. However, a woman can do rough stitching even immediately, even within the shiva, because of her honor, that she shouldn't be exposed, immodest. So this would be another solution, to just put a pin or something so that she will not be very exposed. Regarding other relatives, one can tear with one's hand or using a utensil, a razor, or scissors. But for one's parents, it must be done with by hand. Nowadays, we usually use scissors to start off because it's hard to tear the hem, but then we do the rest we ask the mourner to do the rest by hand. ואמר רבי חייא בר אבא אמר רבי יוחנן על כל מתים כולם מבפנים ועל אביו ועל אמו קורע מבחוץ אמר רב חיסדא וכן לנשיא. So regarding all the other relatives, one rends his garments on the inside, but you don't have to do all the garments, you have to do the outermost garment. Whereas for father and mother, you have to also tear the outermost garment. It has to be more evident, more public. And Rav Chisda adds, so too for the Nasi. The Nasi was the political head of the community in Israel, a very important person, sage, and a liaison to the Roman government. And so he was like the patriarch. He was like the father of the whole nation. And so therefore everyone mourns in that way, as if he was a father. Hold on, an objection to this, that we include a nasi in this law. It says, Lo hushvu le'aviv ulimo ela le'ichvui bilvad. This is a braita that we're going to see coming up later on. And it talks about the parents like a nasi, av betin, a teacher. And it says all these are the same as a father and mother, only for the law of sewing back up, that you can't sew that garment back up forever. But that's it. But they're not the same for anybody else. So my lava filu nasi. So doesn't that mean that the law, all the other laws do not apply to the betin, to a teacher, and to the nasi, including carrying the outermost garment? So this is a contradiction, because here you said the outermost garment does apply to a nasi like a father, and according to this, only one law, but not the outermost garment. And we answer la levad min nasi. No, we mean the other people on that list, the betin and the teacher. Those people are not the same as a father, except for this one law of sewing up. But the nasi is like a father for other things. And we end with a story. Nesi'ah Shechib. One time the nasi died. Amar le Rab Chisda le Rab Hanan bar Rava. Kefe asita bekum ala ve'achve kiri'ah le'alma. And Rav Chisda said to Rab Hanan bar Rava, go and get a mortar and turn it over. We saw a picture yesterday of that big mortar, and so this would be like standing on a milk crate or something. So to be high up, and then tear your garment to show publicly to everyone your great your great act of mourning. There, everybody will see that, and they will also do the same, and also feel the loss of the nasi. So this is following up on how great the loss of a great leader is, and we'll continue on that same theme tomorrow. Baruch Adonai Leolam. Amen ve'amen.